Welcome to Smart Searching 2, searching for topics using databases. This follows on from Smart Searching 1, finding full text. So, by the end of this session, you will know how to identify when to use databases and the main features you'll find within them. We'll look at breaking down your research question into its individual components and preparing those to put into a database to search. We'll look at the database search techniques you will need to use. We'll see how to log in and run a search, how to save and export results from a search, and then move on to controlled vocabulary and how to use it if needed, before finishing up with how to find further help. Let's take a quick look at what databases are and when you'd use them.
What are databases and when should I use them? What are databases? Databases are search engines that organize content on particular topics or in specific formats to make finding relevant information easier and more comprehensive. When we talk about databases in higher education, we usually mean academic databases, some of which focus on very specific subject areas, while others cover much wider topics. While the majority of these resources focus on academic journal content, you will also find other, more specialized content, such as video, company information, statistics, newspapers, primary sources, patents and standards, research methodologies, and theses. We are always adding new databases, and occasionally they change name or provider. When do I need to use them? You normally use a database to find out about topics you want to know more about. In most cases, they are not used to find an article you already know exists. Whether you are doing research for an assignment, capstone project, thesis, or a forthcoming publication, the databases will help you find relevant results more efficiently. While the library catalogue and search tool, Stella Search, is good for finding links to papers you already know exist or for doing a quick topic search, it is not designed for large-scale or advanced searching for articles. Instead, let the relevant databases in your subject area do the heavy lifting.
As we saw there, you generally use a database to find out more about a subject. If you are actually looking for the full text of a specific article, a database is not generally the place to go. You should try looking it up in Google Scholar. If you have installed our Lean Library browser extension, that will make finding the PDF much easier. Or try looking it up in the library catalogue Stella Search. So you don't go to a database to find a PDF of something. You use it to look up things about a topic. So here at Trinity, we have access to over 900 databases. Some of these we get for free, a lot of them we have subscribed to and pay an annual fee for them, along with other university libraries. The point of them is they contain comprehensive and quality assured academic information, so it's not like just doing a search on Google and finding something randomly. A lot of them contain what's called peer-reviewed articles, but not all. So some contain other information such as conference proceedings or book chapters, that sort of thing. Let's talk a little bit about research questions and frameworks to try and split those things up. So sometimes you'll be given a question by your lecturer or by a supervisor, that sort of thing, and you will need to search for the information in that question. Sometimes you need to come up with that question yourself. So we do have some guidance on this in a different HITS presentation called Defining Your Research Question. Either way, you will need to divide up your research question into parts in order to search for the information on those individual parts. Perhaps the classic way of splitting up a research question is using what's called the PICO framework: population, intervention, comparator, and outcome. For instance, the population might be old people. The intervention might be a treatment or a drug or a process or a program. The comparator might be placebo, or it might be a different type of program or of process, and the outcome might be, say, better mental health or quality of life. This is not the only type of framework, and depending on your area of study, others might be more appropriate. So for instance, Spider there is now used quite often in qual and mixed method research rather than this standard Pico framework. In order to get more of a handle on this, look at our LibGuide doing a systematic review, as coming up with a research question is part and parcel of doing this more advanced type of study called a systematic review. And specifically on that LibGuide, look at step 1, which talks about research questions, frameworks, and creating what's called a protocol or a draft of what you intend to do. So we're going to have a bit of an exercise here now where we have a specific research question. What is the role of education in promoting positive mental health for teenagers? We need to think about how we split that up and what are the main concepts in this question. So here we are. What is the role of education in promoting positive mental health for teenagers? We believe that the three most important aspects of that question are the education part, the positive mental health aspect, and then the population of teenagers. But that's not all. There are actually secondary concepts there to do with promotion and to do with the role in this. So we may need to use those if we get too many results for our three main concepts when we add them together. Here we give you some of the things that you might use instead of just the term teenagers. So even with teenagers, you can see that you could have the singular of that, teenager, or teen or teens, and then it's completely different synonyms, things which mean the same thing, which could be used instead of it, such as youth or adolescent or adolescence. Okay, so for our two other main concepts, education and positive mental health, can you think of any other related terms for those beyond just those words? Let's try looking at education first. Have you come up with any of these ones? And what about for mental health? Did any of these occur to you? And this isn't in any way comprehensive. There are more ones you could come up with beyond this. Now let's take a quick look at how to find which databases you should use and getting started within them.
Finding relevant databases and getting started. Where do I find them? If you already know which database you want to use, from the library homepage, select Databases and eBooks. Both free and purchased databases are listed alphabetically, or you can use the search box. However, for first-time users, this can be overwhelming, as we have hundreds of databases. So if you want to get a feel for the databases in your subject area, we advise you start with recommendations from your subject librarian, who will list the key databases for your topic. You can see these either from your subject librarian's page or from using the drop-down in the databases A to Z. If your work is interdisciplinary, take a look at other subjects for further suggestions. You can also see databases narrowed down by type, such as newspapers or ones that contain details of theses. Do I need a login? For databases we subscribe to, you will need your college username and password, which will give you access wherever you are. Some resources, like SciFinder, may also require you to register for a personal account before you can use them. Most databases allow you to create an account to save searches and article details, but this is not usually mandatory. However, some, like the ones from ProQuest, require this to export larger amounts of results, so it never hurts to set an account up. Why do some databases look the same and some look different? It's easy to confuse the name of the company that makes the database, or what's called the platform, with the database itself. For example, Ebsco is a company that provides access to many databases. There is no database called Ebsco. However, these databases all belong on the same platform, EBSCOhost, which means the databases all look, feel, and work similarly. If you can use one database on a platform, you probably know how to use all of them. It's often possible to search multiple databases at the same time on one platform. However, while this is tempting, it is not always the best approach. Some of these databases, such as ERIC and Medline, for example, from Ebsco, are also available on other platforms from other providers, such as Ovid and ProQuest. They look and work differently from one another, but the same database on another platform should have broadly the same data within it.
So the techniques we list here can be used in the vast majority of databases. So if you can use one database, you can learn to use any of them. The particular things we think you really need to know about are what are called Boolean operators, and specifically and or. How you would use phrases, truncation and proximity to narrow down your results or to broaden them. What fields in a database are, how to put limits and filters on something that you've run, and slightly more advanced is using controlled vocabulary or subject terms. We will now give you a very quick overview of all these techniques, but you should really go to our Writing a Literature Review LibGuide and specifically the page on developing a search strategy for more information. A brief overview then. And or are what are called Boolean operators. And is used between different concepts and searches. So as we have here, education and well-being. So and will narrow your search because it has to mention all of those things. Or on the other hand, is used between synonyms or related concepts. So for instance, teenagers or young people or youths. Or broadens your search or gives you more. If you're looking for an exact phrase, then you generally put them in quote marks, and it then looks for those exact terms in that exact order next to each other. So here we have the example, quote, well-being, end quote. And those words have to be next to each other in that order. Proximity is like this, but lets you have the amount of words in between that you specify, and often they can be in either order. There might well be another way of specifying them in the exact order that you've entered them. This is not available in all databases, so we're not going to show you this in our examples. For instance, PubMed is one of the main databases where you cannot do this type of proximity search. Truncation, on the other hand, and that almost always uses an asterisk, lets you use the stem of a word to find words like that or longer with that beginning of the word. So in this example, teen asterisk will get you teen, teens, teenage, teenager, teenagers, and any other variants that are longer than teen. A field is used to find information within what are called indexes. So the sources in the database, for example, a journal article or a book chapter or a conference proceedings, have these fields such as the title, the abstract, the year of publication, so on and so forth, the author, the author's institution. There are normally lots of these for any type of record. Some come exactly from the source itself, such as the title, although sometimes it's the translation of that title. Some are actually added by the database after the source is looked at by the people at the database. An example of that is normally controlled vocabulary, which we've mentioned throughout this recording. That is added by the people at the database looking at it and putting them under the control vocabulary for that particular database. It doesn't come from the source itself. And then finally, limits, often called filters, are where you restrict your search down in a particular way to make it smaller. A common example of that would be by language, such as only looking for articles in English, or for articles which are published after a certain date, such as 2010. Other ways would be by publication type, such as only looking for articles and not looking for book chapters or theses or the like. In a particular platform, this is Ebsco host we're showing you here, in a database within it, you can see where these different elements show up. When you actually start using a database, this will make far more sense. So we need to prepare our search terms, what's called our search string. These things here are the different strings for a search. Okay, so we've got a string to do with adolescence, a string to do with positive mental health, and a string to do with education. We need to get them ready to go into a database so that we can apply these techniques to it. So here we've listed the individual terms or groups of terms that we want to use. And then to put those into a database, we use these Boolean operators, specifically or between synonyms, and phrases and truncations to do this. We tend to do this in our word processor in Word as part of making a record of this thing called your search strategy. So your search strings make up the search strategy. Now, as you're going to have to document this whole process, doing it in Word just makes it a lot easier, to be honest, because you can then paste that into A, the databases, but B, into your final essay or thesis or other written work. So we've taken those words which we've thought of to do with these three concepts, and now we've translated them using these techniques, using Boolean operators, using specifically or between the synonyms, using quotes for phrases such as well-being or young people, and using truncation. So for instance, after youth there to get youth, youths, youthful, and so on. And you can see that the truncated stem doesn't necessarily need to be a word. So educat with a synonym will get you education, educated, and so on and so forth. Now, you may even think of more terms. We've got some there, but it depends what you want to do, or if you get too few results. If you get too few results, then you may need to add in more terms as synonyms to broaden your search. So for instance, we came up with teach for teaching and teacher, or student for student and students, study, studying, school, schools, so on and so forth. And as we said just now, these different lines are called search strings, and together they make up what's called a search strategy. We had three strings there, one to do with the population, with teenagers, one to do with the intervention, which is positive mental health, and then one to do with education. Whether you would use all of those actually depends on the database. So Web of Science, which is one of our go-to interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary databases, you would use all of those three strings and perhaps extra ones if you get too many results. But if you are in the database ERIC, which is an education database, so all the stuff in there is to do with education, it's looking in education journals, you wouldn't need to put in the education string because it's all to do with education. Another example of that is if you are looking for what's called a randomized controlled trial. So this is in the biomedical sciences again. These things are called RCTs. There are databases which are specifically RCTs. So if you're doing a search in Web of Science, you need to put in words to do with randomized controlled trials, but not if you're in a database which is entirely made up of randomized controlled trials. So here we can see just those concepts listed again. There's up to 5 of them, but you wouldn't necessarily use all 5 in every database, but you need to think about them in case you do need to use them in every database. So as we said there, in ERIC or other education databases, I wouldn't put in the concept words to do with education. In some of them, I may get too many results, and I have to go beyond our 3 key concepts of education, mental health, and teenagers to look at promotion and role. It really does depend. So let's look at that in a real world scenario in the database ERIC. So we've got our first string here, which is to do with the concept of teenagers. And you can see we have perhaps some extra terms here like post-primary, which have been suggested to us by our own knowledge of education and education databases. So we put them into the first line. We then paste exactly the same thing into the second line, into the second search box. We make sure that we've got the correct fields, the correct areas in the record selected. And we always recommend, if you're searching for topics, at least looking in the title and abstract. And then finally, we make sure that or, that Boolean operator, or to give you more, is selected between the 2 lines of the search. And then you hit search. And when you're taken to the results for that particular search, it can be very complicated. You will see lots of additional things on the side which enable you to narrow down your results, such as by language or by publication type or by year. There will be lots of things which enable you to see the full text. There will also be ways to add those searches to your folder if you've signed in, or to a temporary folder if you haven't signed in to the database. You don't necessarily need to worry about any of that. This is the sort of thing you can get to grips with over time. English may not be your first language, so quite a number of the databases allow you to completely change the language of the interface. So that's the dashboard where you'll be doing these searches to your own language. So you don't have to search in English. However, the results, i.e. the titles of things that you retrieve, are highly likely to be mainly in English. The vast majority of the works you're going to come across will be in the English language. However, some of those results, when you actually go into them in some databases, here we have an example in Gale Research Complete, will allow you to do translations and the like. And it might be that when you download a PDF or the like, you can translate it yourself. Now, we talked a little bit about setting up individual profiles. So this can be really quite handy. So you don't have to keep running the same search from scratch or even pasting it in and building it up again and again. You sign up for one of these accounts, and then you can save your entire search, which when you were to rerun it in the future would give you extra results if more things have been published, or you can save individual results from the current search into a folder in this profile. So you don't have to do this, but we do think it makes your life a lot easier. In some databases, and ProQuest is the main example that comes to mind here, if you don't do this, you are limited to how many results you can export, i.e. send into something like a reference manager along the lines of Zotero or Endnote. If you don't set up a profile, you are very limited with how many you can do in that particular platform. But it's not the case for all of them. Now let's look at putting all of these individual components together. How do you create a personal account? How do you find out what the fields are and choose them? How do you search for one term to start with or one phrase? How do you then add on different terms to that, add on your synonyms? How do you then search for a completely different topic? How do you then bring together those different searches and combine them? How do you limit your results? How do you save those results? And how do you then send them out into something like Endnote? Getting started with Ebsco databases. For this demonstration, we are using Academic Search Complete, but the same advice applies to all Ebsco databases. Creating a personal account and logging in. This will create an account to save searches and results that can be used in any Ebsco database. Click on Sign in the blue bar at the top. Easiest is using a Google account to create a new personal account with Ebsco. All Trinity student accounts can be used for this. If you are already logged into your browser with the correct Google account, select it or click Use another account to sign into Google. Read the terms on the next page and agree to them if you wish to proceed. Alternatively, you can create an account from scratch without a Google account by clicking Sign Up. If you are logged in, your name will appear at the top right. Once an account is created, next time you use an Ebsco database, use the Google link to pick your account or the sign-in box as appropriate. You will need to do this again if you close your browser or the session times out, so get in the habit of doing it first thing. Using fields such as title and abstract. These can be chosen from the drop-down menu on the right. We recommend always using at least title and abstract. These should have or between them on the left-hand side, so make sure to change this from the default. Searching for one term. Enter your term in the search boxes. If you want to search for a phrase, put it in quotes. The lines should have or between them on the left-hand side. Make sure you have the correct field selected before you click the green search button. Searching for multiple terms on the same topic using OR. Enter your terms in the search boxes. They should have OR between them in capital letters. Again, make sure you have the correct field selected and it says OR between the lines before you click the green search button. Searching for multiple terms on another topic using OR. Delete anything that is currently in the search boxes. Some Ebsco databases will do this automatically. Move on to the next topic you want to find. Enter your terms in the search boxes. They should have OR between them in capital letters. As before, make sure you have the correct field selected and it says "or" between the lines before you click the green search button. Combining searches on different topics using AND. Scroll to the search history section. Tick the searches you want to combine. To combine different topics, use search with AND. Limiting results. There are many ways to limit or filter a search. To filter a search you have just run by publication date, use the slider to the left of the results or type in the start date in the box above it. Saving searches and results. To save a whole search, which can be rerun at a later date and show new results, click Save Searches / Alerts. Give your search a meaningful name. If you are planning to run multiple searches, we recommend putting the name of the database, some of your terms, and the date in the name of it to make it easier to find later. To save individual results, use the plus icon to the right of a result. To see these saved items, click on the folder icon. The tabs on the left give you access to your saved searches and results. Exporting results. To export individual results, temporarily add them to your folder. They can be then sent to a reference manager like Endnote or Zotero. Select the ones you want, then click Export on the right. Most people will click Remove these items from folder after saving, so they don't send the same ones again when they add new results. Click Save. The file can then be opened with your reference manager. To send all your results, up to 25,000 in one go, you use a different method. Make sure you are seeing the results you want and go to the Share section. Click Email a link. On the next page, enter your email address, and this is especially important, change the file type to RIS format. A link to a zip file will arrive by email shortly. Within that zip file is the relevant RIS file to add them to Endnote and so on. If you use a web browser to access your email, depending on the browser, clicking the link may not download the file. In that case, an easy way to download it is to copy the address, open a new tab, and paste the link in. So earlier we talked about controlled vocabulary. What is this? Controlled vocabulary are standardized headings which the individual databases may or may not have. Most of them do have this controlled vocabulary within them. Think of them as being like predefined categories or tags. And the people at the database, when they are going through the information for any particular article or other source, they assign them to these standardized headings. But the headings are different between the different databases. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes it's not a good idea to search multiple databases at the same time. Now, the reason for doing this is it will find stuff that you would not have thought of by using your individual keywords. Because the people at the database have gone, oh yes, this is about this particular topic, we'll put it under this standardized heading, even though it's a word you may never have heard of. Now, not all databases have these user searchable subject headings. The multidisciplinary ones tend not to. So for instance, Web of Science doesn't tend to have these user searchable subject headings. And of course, not all subjects will exist as a heading within every database. An example of that is the thesaurus terms in PsycInfo, which is one of the psychological databases, tend to be all very psychologically orientated. The ones in ERIC are all to do with education, and so on and so forth. Certain things like experience, and people are often searching for people's experiences of a particular concept, don't tend to be the sorts of things that you find as controlled vocabulary. Here is how we might look for controlled vocabulary in one of the Ebsco databases. So again, we're in ERIC, and it calls its controlled vocabulary aspect a thesaurus. In CINAHL, they're called CINAHL headings. In PubMed and Medline, they're called MESH, medical subject headings. So the terminology can vary, but what they do tends to be the same type of thing. So in ERIC, you click on thesaurus, and then you search for whether your particular concept exists as a thesaurus term. So I tend to flip it on to the thing called relevancy ranking here. Put in what you think is the most likely term to actually be in this database. And sometimes you need to search for several before you get anything which looks likely. And then if it comes up with something which looks relevant, you can tick it and you can send it into your search box. So here we would click on select term, then add to search using or add. And this will then go into the search box at the top. And then when we hit the green search button in this particular database, it will then search for everything which has been tagged with that specific thesaurus term. So in the search we were looking at before, in that database ERIC, it has the thesaurus terms adolescence and secondary education. So those would cover the concepts of the teenager. And then when it comes to positive mental health, it has these controlled vocabulary headings: well-being, mental health, and mental health programs. And it wouldn't matter if it called it a mental health program and used the British and Irish spelling of programs rather than the American spelling, it would still be listed under it. You tend to do your searches by searching for the title and abstract fields first for the first concept, and then looking up whether there are any controlled vocabulary subject headings for that concept. This is, as you can imagine, a more advanced way of doing things. As we stated, not all databases have this controlled vocabulary. So you might start off by just doing a title abstract search for your different concepts, seeing how many you get. And if you haven't got enough results, then go back and redo it by adding in this controlled vocabulary. So you can see there we have 3 lines. In the first line, we search for our teenager words in the title or the abstract. Then we looked up these controlled vocabulary terms in the thesaurus section. We found 2 relevant ones, and we found all the results for those. And now we're going to add them together. So when you're adding together things which mean the same thing, related concepts, you would tick them all and then do search with OR. So remember, OR gives you more. And as we can see, that is a higher amount of results than any of the individual ones. It is not the same as adding them all together. You can see that number doesn't add up to the same figures if you were to take them all individually and add them together, because there will be overlap between those concepts within the result set. Okay, so some of those results will mention multiple of the things there we've searched for. So in this more advanced type of search, when we've run the different concepts, and so we've done the title abstract concept and then looked at the controlled vocabulary for that, and then we move on to the next concept and do that and look at the controlled vocabulary. At the end of that, you add them all together. So you find the bits of your search which are, if you will, the super search for a particular concept, where you've added together the title, abstract, and controlled vocabulary, and you tick those. And because they are different concepts, you then use search with and between them. So it is quite possible that you may end up with too many results. When I did this in the real world, I put these headings and these concepts into ERIC and tried running the search. When I searched for just our 3 concepts, I got far too many results, too many to be useful. You're not going to look through 32,000 results. So we needed to move on using techniques to narrow it down. And conveniently, we had 2 other concepts we could look for. So we had the concept of promotion. And in ERIC, I wasn't able to find any other controlled vocabulary to do with promotion. So I'm just doing a title and abstract search for variants of the word promotion, promoted, so on and so forth. And when I anded that in, combined it into the search with and, that brought the search way down. You might think it's still too many results, in which case you would then search for the concept of the role and add that into the search again with and to narrow it down. We can see the same thing in Web of Science. When I did the 3 original concepts, ended up with 76,000, not going to be looking through 76,000 results. Even when I then did the promotion aspect of it, there were still too many results for what I wanted to do. Now, it does depend on the level you're at. If you were doing a systematic review, you might say, well, actually, that's okay. You're wanting to be very comprehensive. But certainly for most things, probably even up to PhD level, you would think that's too many results. So we put in our 5th concept, the concept of the role. And when we did that, we got this nice manageable number, or a far more manageable number, of less than 2,000. For anything beyond the simplest work, an essay, for instance, you will need to run the search across multiple databases. The way we think you should approach this is what's called a systematic approach to searching. You are doing systematic searching. This means that if you look up the words and use them in one database, you would use the same words in all of them, with the proviso that if that database is entirely about that topic, you would leave out that string to do with that topic. Think back on the education search. We do not need to search for education in ERIC because it's all about education, but we would if we were in another database such as Web of Science or Scopus or Academic Search Complete, because they are not just to do with education. And our top tip here again is doing this in Word, because if you get this right, and you can always ask your subject librarian for advice on how best to do this, you will be able to just copy and paste that into the different databases and run it. So here we have 2 more videos which go through all the things we went through in the Ebsco database and all we've been talking about there, apart from using controlled vocabulary, which, as we said, we think is a slightly more advanced topic in Web of Science and ProQuest. Now, we've only been able to touch on these concepts at a very high level. In order to get to grips with them, you need to practice. And one way to do this is to go to what's called the All Aboard Searching Systematically tutorial. This enables you to test out your knowledge and try different things to see how they work in a controlled environment. To finish up, we just want to give you some pointers towards where to go for more help. Every student in college has a subject librarian associated with the particular school or discipline that they are studying. I'm the subject librarian for physics and chemistry, and there are colleagues for every subject taught in college. So go to your subject librarian. On the library homepage, there's a link directly there which will show you what your subject librarian looks like and give you contact details. There are other HITS classes like this one which might be of some relevance to you. Specifically, if you're looking for how to find PDFs, as we said right at the start, Smart Searching 1 shows you how to do that. You may want to see our more detailed information on how to define your research question if you have to come up with one yourself. Our other HITS program on researching for your literature review covers much the same ground as this particular HITS one, but takes a slightly different approach to it. So it's worthwhile looking at that. And then finally, what do you do with your results? If you're doing a capstone project or a thesis, it may well be that you need to take the results out of these databases en masse so that you can use them as part of a study or in your thesis and reference them. So for that, we have a HITS tutorial called Endnote for Beginners, which goes through reference management software as used here in Trinity and promoted by the library. Our guides and tutorials page also has lots of useful information. It links to our guides on how to perform a literature review and how to perform a systematic review, which is different from searching systematically, although uses some of the same techniques. So those LibGuides specifically are writing a literature review and doing a systematic review. And again, you can look at them even if you aren't doing a systematic review. There may be some useful information there. So thank you for your attention. We hope you found that in some way useful. Feel free to contact us if you have any further queries. You can send them direct to your subject librarian, to library@tcd.ie, or you can follow us on social media, where we're to be found generally under @TCD Library. Thank you and best of luck.